Welcome to the Alaska Mold Stories podcast, sponsored by Alaska Mold Dog, with your hostess, Miss Jennifer Kindred.
Welcome to Alaska Mold Stories. Today's special guest is Stefanie, and it's really a pleasure to get to meet her. We have never spoken before or met each other. Stefanie has a story that she's willing to come on and tell us about mold exposure in Alaska. And so that's what this podcast is about. There's so many of us that are living and we're not able to tell our story. And secondly, people don't believe us when we do tell our story. So that's what this platform is all about, is giving a voice to the voiceless here in Alaska. So welcome, Stefanie. We appreciate you coming on tonight and being willing to share this about this very important topic.
Thank you. Yeah, Emily had actually reached out to me and said, you should tell you and your son's story. So I thought about it and I was like, you know what? Yeah, let's do it. So yeah, here I am. Never done something like this before.
Can be a little nerve-wracking, but it'll be good. So thanks again. And so can you just tell our audience how many years ago this was and how it started, where your exposure took place?
So it started for me in October of 2019. It had just always been me and my son, and we were moving into a townhouse, and I thought I scored the deal of a lifetime. He was 8 at the time, and the townhouse, it was 2-bedroom, 1 bathroom, upstairs, downstairs, and it was just probably the biggest place we'd ever lived in. And the rent was super cheap. And being, just a working mom, I thought, again, this is great. This is going to be great for me and my son. The building was old, but again, up until this moment, I had never given mold a second thought. So to me, I was like, oh, it's just an old building. We can make it work. So I moved into the townhouse, and that's also when COVID started. COVID was the following year, and COVID kind of altered our lives a little bit as well. And I had a career change. And in the middle of that career change, probably about mid-2020, I got into working out and eventually training to become a competitive bodybuilder. And during this time, I chalked it all up to the building just being old. The toilet would always back up, or the pipes were leaking. The shared laundry room in between my unit and my neighbor, the laundry room would always they would flood to where the water would come up the drain that was in the floor, and it would flood both of the units. And again, it's fine. The property manager would come in and just throw a fan on it and call it good. And I did notice probably that first year or two that we lived there that I was like, man, my allergies are getting really bad. I just chalked it up to old age, my eyes are bothering me a lot of runny nose and sniffling. My son wasn't displaying any symptoms at the time. So probably about April 2021, I had my first bodybuilding competition. Everything went fine. I placed second in my division, and I was so proud of myself. And then I went on to compete again in October, and I did 2 different divisions, and I placed top 5 in both of them. And then everything kind of went to crap. It was actually exactly December 23rd, 2021. I was upstairs in my kitchen. I was making Christmas cookies. And that's when my first severe medical incident happened. And for whatever reason, I just immediately put everything down and I said, I have to go lay down. I feel like I'm going to faint. And I could literally feel all the blood rushing, like draining from my head is the only way I can describe it. So I went and laid on the couch and I put my feet up, and it wasn't helping. And I don't know why. I just felt like I needed to go downstairs to the bathroom. So I made it downstairs, and the last thing that I remember is waking up on the bathroom floor, and it was completely terrifying. I had no idea what happened. My head hurt really bad. And when I tried to sit up, I couldn't. The whole room was spinning. And I didn't know what to do. Luckily, I had grabbed my phone. So I called my best friend, and she immediately dropped everything and came to my house. And I said, I don't want to call an ambulance because I don't want to alarm my son. And I'm like, all I could think about was, what if I had never come to and my son walked in the bathroom and found me? That would be completely traumatizing for him. So she took me to the ER. And at this time, COVID was still going on. So no one was allowed to come into the emergency room with me. She had to sit out in her truck in the parking lot with my son. It was pretty late at night. And they couldn't figure out what was wrong with me, but they kept me overnight. And at this point, I had a huge goose egg on my head because when I passed out, the building was so old that it had the metal baseboard heaters, and my head hit the corner of the baseboard heater. And to this day, it was 5 years ago, you can feel it's like a divot in my skull right here. You can still feel it. And some days you can actually see it. And I had a concussion. And I, busted both of my lips. And the only thing they could find that was abnormal was they detected a heart murmur, or what they thought was a heart murmur. So I went back in January, followed up with a cardiologist, and I went on a heart monitor for a month, only to have those results come back as normal. There's nothing wrong with my heart. So I chalked it up to, it's just one of those things that happens. Weird things happen to you sometimes. And I went on with my life and thinking that nothing like that's ever going to happen again. Again, my son still hasn't been displaying any symptoms. April 2022, I competed again for the third time. And again, both divisions, I placed top 5. So at this point, this is becoming something that I'm very passionate about, like bodybuilding, my health. And so I'm like, this is going to be something I'm going to do for a while. Like I've, found what makes me happy, and I found what I'm passionate about. So August of that year, 2022, a pretty major flooding happened in the townhouse. And it flooded so bad from the laundry room that it came across the downstairs hallway and into my bedroom and into my closet, and half of my bedroom flooded. And I lost a lot of my shoes, which was really sad because I love shoes and I have a lot of them. And again, the property manager came in and, or the maintenance man, and all they did was put industrial fans on the carpet. And again, because my life is all about working full time, taking care of my son, and then just doing what I do, like, except for outside of the gym, I really don't do much. These people know what they're doing, and called it good, Again, the maintenance man would come in all the time, like, this building just so old. They need to just redo the entire plumbing. It leaks all the time. And I remember him saying all this stuff. And again, didn't give mold a second thought. So March of 2022, we're talking less than a year later, another major flooding. And this time it came from the laundry rooms. My neighbor, both of our hot water heaters were in there, and this time her hot water heater broke. So it flooded the laundry room. And instead of them getting right on it and putting a fan on it, they dragged it out to the point where I'm emailing every day and I'm calling and my carpet's sitting there wet. And then they came in and they said they fixed it, and it wasn't fixed. And I sent them a video of it. It's still leaking and my carpet is still wet. So at this point, the unit smells so bad that I'm like, this can't be good. Like, I sent my son to stay somewhere. And at this point, it had been sitting there for a week. So I cleared out my entire bedroom, dragged all the furniture out, and I ripped up the carpet. And I was completely horrified. And looking back on it now, I'm like, if this was going on and the maintenance man knew about it, that mold was there before I moved in. And it's just really unfortunate that not knowing what I know now, I just I'm having a huge mom guilt, not being educated enough to look for these things before I moved in. So they're ignoring me. I took it upon myself to rip up the entire carpet, and then I dragged it up a flight of steps and out to the dumpster. And when I told them that I did that, that was what it took for them to get back to me. And they actually got mad at me for ripping up the carpet and saying that I didn't have permission to do that. So that began fighting with them. When I told them that I found the mold, they again ignored me. And so I had a mold inspector come in because I had made a post on Facebook. I'm like, I don't know how to handle this. Like, what do I do? Somebody told me, you need call this person. They'll come in and test your home for mold. So I paid out of pocket, and this mold inspector came into the unit, and I got the results probably less than a week later. And I'm still in contact with this man to this day. Like, he has been such a huge help when it comes to information. He told me, I got into this business 20 years ago because my wife almost died from mold poisoning. And he says, I got to tell you, I've only seen numbers this high one other time in my 20 years of doing this. And he's like, you should not be in here. And I looked at him and I was just like, trying not to cry. I'm like, we've been living here for 4 years. Like, so again, the property management company is not responding to me. So I took the mold report and I drove into Anchorage. And I was like, I'm not leaving until I talk to the person that's responsible for this building. And I finally got called into the office and I put the mold report on his desk. And I said, this is what's going on. What are you going to do about it? And I'll never forget that man looked at me and acted like I just ruined his evening. And I said, sir, you get to go home to your family tonight and you get to go home and sleep in your bed tonight. I don't. Like, what are you guys going to do about this? I'm telling you, this is what's going on in the unit, not by me, but by a professional. And they refused to do anything about it. I asked them, I said, will you pay for the remediation? And the mold inspector had given me a quote for the remediation and they refused to do that. So I had no choice but to get rid of most of my stuff and what was salvageable put into storage. And then my son and I, for the next 7 months, were homeless. And in those 7 months, I can't even, looking back on it now, I called agency after agency and the people that I thought, well, there's got to be something because if this is my unit and how it's deemed toxic, what about the rest of the units in this building? And at this point, my neighbor, who was also a single mom at the time, she had already been in and out of the hospital and they couldn't figure out what was wrong with her. She had to have tubes put in her ears. Just, crazy stuff. So, but every single agency that I called, nobody could help me. And at one point, I'd get my hopes up because somebody would agree to talk to me. And then at the end of it, oh, there's nothing we can do for you. Try talking to this person. And it ended up being like me I'm being passed off to this person, passed off to that person. And I feel like it was like my last ditch effort was I was volunteering at an event one evening. And the commissioner of the health department happened to be there. She got up to say a few words. So in my brain, I'm like, health department, this is a health hazard, right? That's where my brain connected it. So I approached her and we set up a meeting, a Zoom meeting, and I told her our whole story. And but it wasn't even me. I hadn't even connected the dots from my health issues yet. This was just me like, how can somebody deem something toxic and then this person over here still gets to profit off of that? To me, like that's not right. So that was my goal in all of that. So after all that, she's like, well, I'm going to push this up to my bosses and the higher ups and see what we can do for you. Only 30 minutes later for her to email me and say, okay, well, there's nothing we can do. And at that point, like, I'm really trying to keep my composure. But I remember responding to her and saying, I don't think you understand how frustrating this is. You're the commissioner of the health department, and I'm telling you something that's causing like a health problem and a health hazard. And I said, I don't understand why this doesn't fall under something that you have the power to do something. And I said, I can't believe that we live in the greatest country in the world and nobody can help me and my son right now. I said, I don't buy it. This is wrong. So where am I at here? We moved out, and luckily my friend had a garage that she had years ago turned into like a little studio apartment. So my son I proceeded to live there in this tiny little garage that was converted into a little apartment. And so grateful to this day for her doing that. June 2023 was the last time that I competed before I was told I couldn't compete anymore because of my health. And thankfully, if anybody is like spiritual, believes in God, I believe God knew what he was doing because I finally placed for first place in my division. And very well may have been the last time I was able to compete. So that was like a huge win for me because the October of that year, second major medical incident, I, in the middle of all this, have also gotten involved in like the pageant life and have a couple of titles under my belt. And that comes with doing a lot of community service and volunteer work. So I was actually volunteering at the mayor's ball that night in Anchorage, and everything had been fine. And I was on my feet all day though, because I had worked first and then, went into Anchorage to volunteer. And we all decided, there's 4 of us that decided to go out to eat afterwards. And I sat down and stuffed down some pizza and some salad. And then I could literally, within like 5 minutes of eating, I felt it coming on again, and I did not feel well, but I didn't, it was a different kind of feeling than the last incident. So I was like, what's going on? Something's wrong. And I remember I even took off my jacket, and I was just like, I have to do something. And so my best friend who had come to save me the first time, she looked at me, she goes, "Are you okay?" And I said, "No, something's wrong." And she's like, "Are you drunk?" And I said, "No, I haven't drank anything." And so then I started, like, all of a sudden my dress felt too tight. So I started unzipping the back of my dress, and I'm like, maybe I need to go to the bathroom. But then when I like scooted out of the booth, it's like, I can't stand up. And so I ended up literally laying down in the booth. And my, my friend looked at me and she's like, "You're going to get us kicked out of here." So she like pulled me up, and I remember looking at her and just getting really angry, and looked at her and I yelled at her. I'm like, "I'm not drunk." And that's the last thing that I remember. And when I woke up, I was on the floor of the restaurant. I was surrounded by my friends and all of the EMTs who they called. And I remember it was probably the most terrifying feeling in the world, because I could hear everything that was going on. I was completely aware that I was being poked to, take a blood draw. I was aware of everything. I could hear everybody. I could not move any part of my body. I couldn't even like open my eyes. I couldn't even like move my eyeballs back and forth. I was just laying there like, and I remember thinking, I wonder if this is how people in a coma feel. I wonder if this is what goes on. And then I'm like, is this how I'm going to be for the rest of my life? Like, I can't even like tell them that I can hear them and that I'm okay. You know what I mean? So then I heard one of the EMTs say her blood sugar is at 40 right now, and didn't know anything about blood sugar. But knowing that now, like a 40 is a very dangerous level to be at. And in essence, I probably could have died if like my best friend, who was also a retired firefighter, once she figured out that I passed out, and she was like, "No, there's something wrong." Anybody else probably would have thought that I had too much to drink and would have just left me there to sleep it off, and I probably would have died. So once I finally was able, I don't know how long I laid there before I could finally like open my eyes and like talk. But I just remember, driving home, the whole car was silent, and, I was still living with my best friend at the time, and she helped me into bed. And then the next day I was like, I don't know what to do. Like, what kind of a doctor do I see? Like, what do I do with this? So the next month, though, my son and I finally did find a tiny little apartment to move into. And at that time I had filed a small claims suit against the property management company. And that hearing took place at the same time that we moved into our new apartment. And again, I felt super hopeful, because I'm like, this cost me a lot of money. Didn't even get my security deposit back from the other place. Like, I'm broke. It's just me and my son. That's it. So I had high hopes that I was going to go in there and I was going to win my case, because at this point I had all my ducks in a row. I came in with a stack of papers like this, and, I presented my case. I had my pictures. I had everything. And I'll never forget sitting there, and the judge sided with the property management company. And I couldn't get, once she made her decision, I couldn't get out of there fast enough, because I knew, and I'm not a very emotional person, but I knew that I was so just defeated and beat down at that point that I'm like, I have to go somewhere and just cry right now. I'm like, I'm going to lose my crap. So I remember walking out of the courtroom, and there was people sitting there waiting for their case. And the man reached out and he took my hand and he goes, "You were very well prepared. You should not have lost that case." And I looked at him like, well, how is that supposed to help me right now? You know what I mean? Like, I lost. So I went out to my car, cried it out for a little bit. And I was like, okay, well, now what? So found a new doctor, and they wanted, and it's, and all of this, I am realizing that I'm like, I'm getting frustrated with the doctors, because I'm like, how can you guys, like, it's 2023. How can you guys not give me any answers for what's going on with me right now? Yeah. I got referred to a neurologist, and he wanted to immediately put me on anti-seizure medication. And I looked at him and said, I'm not taking that medication, because once I go pick up that prescription and take it, I'm basically saying, yes, I'm epileptic. That's going to affect me being able to drive. That's going to affect me being able to work. I'm a hairdresser. You're going to tell me that I can't work anymore? You know what I mean? So I didn't take this anti-seizure medication. And when I did tell him about and again, still haven't connected the dots between the mold. I just told him this has happened before. And he just automatically said, oh, well, now you have epilepsy. I'm like, but I don't. But anyways, so he recommended me to do a sleep study. So the end of February, I went in and had a sleep study. And again, nothing came of it. So again, like I'm like, well, you guys want to do all this stuff for me, but it's not, I'm not getting any answers. So it makes me not want to do it. So March of 2024, my son had already been telling me for about a month that he kept saying, all he kept telling me was, Mom, my stomach is abnormal. And I said, well, what do you mean? He's like, well, see, one side sticks out further than the other. And I'm like, okay, well, because in your mind, like you never think that it's anything serious. So I'm like, well, your body's not symmetrical. One of my arms is longer than the other one. And I just kind of kept brushing him off. And again, mom guilt, when I talk about it. So he wakes up one morning and he says, Mom, it's starting to hurt. And I said, okay, well, if there's pain, then we got to go get it looked. So I made him an appointment. We go into the doctor that day. And I remember walking in the door and I'm like, okay, well, when we're done, we should be out of here in like 20 minutes. When we're done, this is what we have to do. And the doctor came in and looked at him and he's like, oh yeah. He goes, so I'm guessing this is coming from where his spleen is. And he's like, has he been in any accidents lately? I'm like, no, nothing. And he's like, well, we're going to test him for mono because that's another symptom of a swollen spleen. And so they tested him for mono and it came back negative. And so he's like, well, I'm going to recommend an ultrasound and our tech is actually here right now. Would you mind? I said, sure, let's just get this over with. And we go in there and we were in the ultrasound room for probably 30 to 45 minutes. And you're never in there for that long. And the ultrasound tech's not saying a word. And so like I knew instantly, I started like, something's wrong. So she's like, okay, you can go back into the room and wait for the doctor. And the doctor comes in and he was like, serious. I don't want to say distraught, but like he was super like really concerned. He's like, listen, he goes, your son has a massive tumor in his chest. And he's like, it's so massive, we can't tell where it's coming from. And he goes, and, if it ruptures or it does anything, he goes, it will kill him instantly. And he's like, so I think that you should go sit at the ER right now and I'm going to make some phone calls and like figure, like he was just like, he literally said, I've never seen anything like this before. And I'm like, okay. And then instantly, like, I didn't hear anything he said to me after that. So I'm like, this has to be like fake. This is fake. I'm being pranked right now. So we leave. And of course, like my son heard all of this. And now like we're both just like dead silence on the way home. And I'm like, okay, well, I guess I'm just going to go back to work and wait for the phone call. And so, the doctor called me back when I was at work. And he's like, and at first he told me that they were flying a surgeon from Seattle here to Alaska because this was such a unique case. That's what I was told firsthand. And then he referred me to a surgeon. And so it was all just kind of like a whirlwind and not having anything like major, like this life-threatening happen. I also had to get a crash course on how to navigate through advocating for your child and getting mad and yelling at the insurance companies because they're moving too slow. So it was very, very overwhelming. Long story short, my son, and then they had to find out where the cyst was coming from because they didn't know what caused it. The last test they had to do on him was to rule out if it was a parasite causing it. And of course, it wasn't a parasite either. So less than a week from when they first found it, and it was a 15 centimeter cyst. So it was extremely massive. He went into Providence where the surgeon claims that she drained and removed it. And that's a whole nother story in itself. That's a separate medical incident because the surgeon ended up botching my son's surgery horribly. And within a month, the cyst had grown back to almost its normal massive size. So now I'm just, so overwhelmed. May that year, 2 months later, when we finally figured out that, I figured out that it was back and that the surgeon, the whole surgeon's office had failed us miserably. I demanded a referral to Seattle because she thought that she was going to be able to operate on him again. I said, no, you're not touching my son again. So we got a referral to Seattle. And in May, we went down there for the consult. And so again, this is costing a lot of money because even though my son's double covered, they weren't covering travel costs. And that later on was due to the first surgeon's incorrect medical notes that she refused to go back and fix. So that was affecting Medicaid, kicking up the costs that my son's primary insurance wasn't going to cover. So I had to pay out of pocket a lot. The consult went well. And in July, we went back for his second surgery where the damage was so bad that she removed, he had a partial spleen removal. So once he came back and we recovered from that, I do need to go back though, because I forgot a pretty crucial thing. At my son's first surgery back in March, when they wheeled him back, I got onto Facebook to try to distract myself. And this is where I started connecting the dots from our illnesses to the mold, because it was that day a year prior was when I got the results from the mold inspector. And so I feel like this all played out well because I wouldn't have connected the dots had I not gone on there and saw that. And then it was instantly like, I remember putting my phone down. I'm like, is this from the mold? And then that's when I was like, when we got back home from the first surgery, I called the mold inspector and I told him everything. And I said, you can tell me that I'm crazy. You can tell me that I'm reaching or I'm being a hypochondriac, but I'm trying to get answers as to what caused this because nobody can seem to tell me like what happened, what caused this. And so he said, oh, absolutely. So he referred me to an alternative medicine doctor in Anchorage. And so she saw him one time before we realized that the cysts had come back. So but again, alternative medicine doctors don't bill insurances directly. So once I figured out that the cyst was back, I had to put her on hold and go back to fixing this problem first. But she was in agreement with me. And then I even told her about like my issues and my symptoms. And so that's when I started realizing that like, yeah, this is probably all from our mold exposure. And because I remember looking at her, I'm like, this is completely frustrating. I'm like, I'm the healthiest person in my family. There's no reason any of this should be happening to us right now. So after my son was all healed up from his partial spleen removal, we went back to the alternative medicine doctor in August of 2024. And I paid out of pocket to have 2 mycotoxin tests done on him, a urine one and a blood one, and both of them confirmed. Well, due to the doctors, she had to like decipher because this is all still really new to me. Like I feel like it's so overwhelming, and half the time I feel like I still don't know what I'm doing. But yeah, it confirmed the presence of toxic mold in my son's system. So January 2025, we went back to Seattle for his follow-up and everything's on track right now. This cyst is gone, hasn't come back. So after all that, I picked up where I left off with getting my health in order. And they put me back on a heart monitor. I had to be on a heart monitor from the first incident. And then they put me back on another one in August of 2025. Again, came back normal. I had a mammogram done back then as well. And then I have not been very proactive on, following up and being like more better at taking care of myself, mostly because it's like, it's discouraging and it's expensive. And yeah, so it was kind of a wake up call though. This past April, I discovered a lump in my right breast, and I was just kind of hoping it was one of those things where, your hormones flare up or whatever, and then eventually it all kind of evens out and works itself out. And that didn't happen. So I went in and got it looked at, and apparently it was a 5 centimeter cyst in my right breast. And then when they ultrasounded my other one, both of them are riddled with them right now. And of course, every single doctor, when I tell them, we were exposed to mold, oh, there's no way, that's not possible. Mold can't do that to you. And it's just really frustrating to be dismissed like that. You know what I mean? Because I'm like, I don't believe in coincidences. And now here, my son and I have both developed cysts in our upper chest region that have required surgery for removal. Tomorrow, I will be 7 weeks post-op from having this cyst removed. It came back benign. So as his cyst did as well. So yeah, like that's kind of where we're at right now. I'm only a few years into this learning about mold, and I still feel like I know nothing. But at the same time, it's like you got every single doctor we came in contact with, and it's super frustrating. Like, you guys run all your tests, and come to your conclusions. Oh, this just happens. Well, no, I don't buy that. And then I give you another avenue to explore. Well, how about this? And I get brushed off. You know what I mean? So watching the other two podcasts was super informative, because seeing some of the numbers where I just read your post the other day. Alaska is number one in the nation for mold in homes. And I'm like, why are we not taking this seriously? Like, why is this not an issue? So I had a lawyer working on, because I wanted to sue the property management company. Once I figured it out, I wanted to do that. And, but I wanted to do it the right way, because like, this is not about me. This is about my son, who, like, he's altered for life. You know what I mean? He's immune compromised. We're years later, like, he's in therapy. I'm not trying to put all of his business out there, but he's diagnosed with PTSD from medical trauma. And he's dealing with a lot of other things that happen because of this. And so I got a lawyer, and he worked on it for about 6 months trying to make a case for me. And he even had a lawyer from Oregon who specializes in mold related illnesses. And they tried for 6 months, and they could not come up with a way to sue this property management company. And it all boils down to the fact the lawyer from Oregon said it's going to be really hard to win this because there are no mold laws in Alaska. And so I sat there that day, and again, I felt the same way that I did leaving the court hearing. I'm like, this is just so wrong and unfair, And I'm like, I'm not someone going into a restaurant and spilling hot coffee on myself and trying to get a lawsuit. This is literally like something that it's unfair and unjust that happened to my son. And you're telling me that, like, there's nothing that anybody can do about it? And I said, okay, well then fine. How do you make a law? Like, how do you get a law put into place? So again, I'm huge on, the power of prayer. So I was praying one day, I'm like, God, if you want me to just let this go, then you have to take this, whatever is in my heart right now. You just have to make it go away and make me not think about it ever again. I said, but if I'm not supposed to let this go, I need you to tell me who I'm supposed to talk to about this, right in front of me, make it very obvious. So, and people might say it's a coincidence, but again, I don't believe in coincidences. I went to church the next day, and this happened to be right around the time that we were having one of our local elections. And my pastor had invited all of the local politicians to go to my church, and then some that didn't even go to our specific church, but they go to other churches in our area. And I look up, and there's my friend who we were rivals in high school, playing basketball against each other, but we kept in contact. And there she is, just standing there. And I'm like, okay. So afterwards, I went up and talked to her, and I said, if you have some time, can we meet? And I have a story that I'm going to tell you. So I told her our story, and I said, so how do we make a law? Like, what do we do? Like, and so she has been working with me now for probably about a year and a half, and our story has made it to Juneau, and she did tell me it's going to be a slow process. And I said, I'm here for it. You know what I mean? Like, I don't care how long. But yeah, so that's what I've been telling people. If you have a mold story, I've got a representative in Juneau that she said, tell everyone to send me their stories. The more stories, the better. And because this is something that we need in Alaska, especially if we are the number one in the nation for this. This is a problem. And I don't understand why we're not addressing it if it's a problem. And just like I'm sure everybody else at first, I thought that my son and I's was just like one of those fluke things, an isolated incident, because, like I said, nobody thinks about mold. But if it's this deadly and this can cause this much damage, again, I don't know why we're not talking about it. You know what I mean? And especially learning about all of the other sicknesses and illnesses that can be directly linked back to mold. Like, why are we not talking about it? You know what I mean?
Right. And
So that's what I want.
Yeah, that's why I started this podcast. And I, like you, believe in providence, not coincidence. And this is providence having you on, because I'm also connected with changetheairfoundation.org. I can hook you up with Brandon Chapo, who would love to set up a Zoom meeting with whatever representative you're working with. And his group We have worked really hard to get legislation passed in many states, and they're not going to stop until every state has addressed this. So I think we just celebrated Iowa passed legislation. So they've written the bills, they know what they look like. And so that's very encouraging. I'm very proud of you for doing that. A couple questions, if you don't mind, I'd like to ask is, I find it very interesting. And I know the answer, but I'm going to ask, they never biopsied any of the tumors looking for ochratoxin or aflatoxin, did they? Like any of the micro.
I don't know because I have, at least for my son, I haven't got all of my medical records yet because my primary care doctor really dropped the ball on me. So now I'm like, I don't even want to go back to her right now. This cyst in my breast showed up a year ago on the mammogram and nobody told me about it. And to find out that it was there for 2 years ago and nobody told me about it. So to find out it was there that long, right around the time that my son was going through his, again, not a coincidence. My son, however, I have a stack of papers this tall both from Providence and from Seattle. And I have every single medical note. I don't understand them. So I know that the answer's in there. I just don't know how to find it or how to just tell if that's what they tested him for. But they did say that they biopsied it. I don't know what they biopsied it looking for.
Yeah. So many of my providers are outside of our state because like you, it's the same situation. And I loved, you said you used a year a while ago. You said it's 2023 and I can't find anybody. And this is what I've been telling people. It's 2026. Information, technology, scientific data is overturning so fast that this is the issue I have with the gaslighting in Alaska. If you say to a provider, could it be mold? Their response should be, I have never researched or looked into that, but it should never be no.
And that's what it is.
Yeah. And so my ENT that I go to in Atlanta, Georgia, he has biopsied what he finds. And 95% of tumors and stuff, whatever group he's working with, have come back with aflatoxin, ochratoxin. It's a huge number. And so it is.
What was the second one? What was the second one? The aflatoxin and what else?
Ochratoxin. Mm-hmm. And if you did the real-time labs urine test, it on the back, I love their informational sheet because it will tell you what mycotoxin causes what cancer, tumor. That's the other thing that you brought up. As much as I can, I let people know that the NIH, and I'll have people say, well, what's the NIH? And I'm like, the National Institute of Health just updated their website last April 25th to include neurological, cognitive, cancer, that mold does. I mean, you can go find that today. And again, that's just people not doing their research and staying up with the current information. They want to live back like it's 1980 or something. And I'm sorry, you're being left in the dust, but don't leave us in the dust too. Those of us that are like, we're curious. We want to know. We want to provide the best for our child and our health. You and I have very similar passions about health and different things. And it's so exciting to get to meet you tonight. I hope I can become a resource for you. And your advocacy is wonderful. I want to touch on the courts really quick up here. And then the lawyer thing, we can talk afterwards, but the courts are stacked against us right now in Alaska as well. And what I'll say is I learned this, and this is why I'm going to put this on this podcast. There was a gentleman, you can look up his workman's comp claim. It was Rife versus Arctic Catering in 2022. And for whatever reason, in my opinion, the lawyer either threw the case or was incompetent to represent this gentleman because the lawyers said that there's no such thing as mold illness in the ICDM. Okay, well, I have 2 medical providers in my family, and I asked them, I said, I have a mold illness code, and I've had one as my diagnosis since 2022. So I asked them, I said, this is really weird. When the judge is quoting the ICD-9, and they said, what? ICD-9? And I go, yeah. The judge literally in that workman's comp claim quoted one of the reasons why I am, the judgment is because there's no mold illness diagnosis code in the ICD-9. The ICD-9 has not been used since 2015. If I would have been a lawyer in that case, the minute the opposing counsel put in there that the ICD-9 does not have a diagnosis code, I would have followed it up with, we haven't used the ICD-9 for 7 years. We use the ICD-10 and here's the code. And so the more you dig into this and the more you talk to people, I don't know. It's mind-blowing though that, like you're saying, in America, we have families and people that are good-hearted Americans. They're working hard. They're losing everything. They're becoming homeless. I told a friend in Anchorage, I said, hey, pull all those Anchorage homeless people and provide them with a mycotoxin test. I'd love to know the data on how many are going to come back full of mold toxicity. I would bet my home that it's 90% or greater. And especially with, like you said, just that updated, I mean, we were rated number 1, but the closest state was, I think, Colorado, and it was like 76 and we're 90. We're like 20 points higher than them. I kind of disagree with the lakes being the reason why, I believe that there's a lot of different factors, but
so here's another part to my story that once I figured out that I was not going to be able to sue the property management company because I stayed quiet because I didn't want to ruin it for myself. The day I left the lawyer's office, I drove over to my old unit, the row of townhouses, and I knocked on the door of my old unit. And a middle-aged Asian man answered the door. English was very broken. And I tried to tell him, I don't know that he grasped what I was saying or understood, which made me even more angry. The fact that there was like a cultural and language barrier there. I'm like, that's on purpose. You know what I mean? And so I don't know if he grasped the situation. He goes, oh, no, I feel fine. And I'm like, and so he goes, well, yeah, so what I do when it starts to smell really bad in here is I just open up all the windows and the doors. So that tells me that I'm like, I gave them a copy of the mold report and they did not properly remediate the unit and they just moved someone else right in. And again, like, how is that legal? That you're profiting off of a building that is toxic, making people sick. So, and again, people might say I'm taking it too far or I'm obsessed, but I'm like, that building should be leveled right now. The whole thing. There's 6 units in there. So probably about maybe March or April of this year, I took a day and I typed out my son and I's entire story. And I put pictures of my son's cyst in there. And I put pictures of the mold in the unit and everything. And I made 6 packets and I left them at each of the doors there. Cause I'm like, I'm not going to be quiet about it. We might have been out of the unit for about 3 years now, but I'm not going to be quiet about it because every person that lives in that unit is going to get sick. And it was super triggering. Also, our current lease right now in our home is about to be up. And so I'm looking for a new place. And wouldn't you know it, one of the units in that old building popped up on one of the apartment websites and I got super triggered. I'm like, how is this? Like, I told multiple agencies and multiple people about this building and it's toxic. And I showed them, this is just me talking. Here's the mold report. You know what I mean? How is this still allowed? How?
Yeah, I hope we get answers one day. But through my talking with people, there's more of us that have been impacted than not. I'll just tell you, most people I have found, well, quite a few of them move out of state. Even a good friend of mine that was just poisoned up in the valley, she moved to Flagstaff, Arizona. And so when I see the state saying, why are we losing our young? We need to keep our kids here and this and that. I always put on the post, because you're not addressing the living situation. This lady, it killed her. She sold everything off, got on an airplane with bags and left our state. And let me tell you, she's worked at our Kenai Peninsula College. She was working, she's wonderful. She is like the dream citizen, and she can't live up here because it's that toxic for her anymore. And again, nobody believes her, just like you're saying. So she's out and she's doing much better down there in that climate. And I know she's not the only one. I hear story after story about families that have left and lost everything, and they end up living with relatives for a while down in the States and reclaiming their life back. And like you said, it's time. It's time to say, for whatever reason, enough's enough.
Yeah.
And this is poisoning. And I bring that up. This is environmental poisoning. If your landlord put radon, or not radon, but like arsenic in a glass of water and gave it to you and your son, they would go to jail. Okay? So ignoring water damage that causes toxic mold, especially Stachybotrys, there's 5 non-negotiable molds. Stachybotrys and Cotomium are very, very common in drywall and wet carpet, which you're saying. Even the tack strips that I have tested come back with Cotomium on them. And it, like, it, yeah, it's horrible poisoning. You know that. And again, thank you so much for coming on here tonight. How are you guys doing right now with your medical? Are you happy with your doctors? Do you feel
No, I mean, yeah, I just feel like the medical field just let us down so bad here in Alaska. I don't know that I would like to find a doctor that I trust. The alternative medicine doctor in Anchorage, really like her. I just can't afford her. And I understand that, like, you can bill the insurance afterwards. I don't have the $500 out of pocket to drop down, and that's where I feel like that I put my thing aside. Like, I just got the bill from my surgery 7 weeks ago. And if I didn't have Medicaid, I'd be completely screwed right now. It was $27,000. You know what I mean? And so that's why I'm like, but I have to address, the surgeons, they don't know my story. This was not my primary care doctor, but the surgeons who I went back, after my surgery, they're like, well, just keep an eye on them. Sometimes people are just really cysty, and I'm like, I don't even want to sit here and tell you guys my story just to get blown off again. But the fact is, like, I have to do something about the rest of them. You know what I mean? But what do I do? Like, I don't. And now I need to find a new primary care doctor because she was the one that ordered the mammogram 2 years ago. She got the results. I know she saw it. Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you address it? You just let it sit there and fester in me for 2 years, to the point where they tried to aspirate it in the office and she couldn't get the needle through the wall of the cyst. Like that. That's how thick and like in there it was. And that's why I had to have it cut out. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know what it's going to look like for me. And right now, and for this after my surgery, and the next couple of weeks, it's easier for me to just like, I'll just deal with it later. You know what I mean? Because it's very overwhelming. And yeah, I don't know.
So there's a new book that just came out, and it's called I Believe You. What is her name? Something Storm, Christina Storms or something. I have it over there. It's a great read if you've been exposed to mold. She has the science is impeccable. I mean, I told her on Instagram, I said, you hit this out of the ballpark. I have not heard, I mean, I fly a lot of places and meet with a lot of different providers and just mold experts these days. And I've never heard anybody describe it in the terms and the way she does. So it's definitely a must read, in my opinion. And she's one that was put on supplements for a year, and they didn't do anything for her, and she goes through her story. But it's very powerful, and we all know we're all different. That's why mold is such a hidden epidemic. For one, it is hidden in the walls, underneath the carpet, so you can't see it. And if you do see it, I tell people, if you see it, I'm really concerned, because what you can't see is pretty dang bad then. And then number 2 is all 5 people can live in a house with Stachybotrys, and all 5 of them will have different symptoms. But what I hear a lot is like you. I remember I've only had heart palpitations one a couple times in my life, but every time I had those heart palpitations, I was sitting in a chair at my desk as a teacher with my back up against a wall. I've never had a heart palpitation after. I've never had a heart palpitation before. That tells me I know exactly where I was exposed. My eyesight. I also lost my eyesight staring at the screen sitting in that chair. And like you, we chalk it up to, this is what I just said. Oh my gosh, I must be getting older. I stared at the screen too long. No, I have damage to my nerve in my eye socket now from that same exact exposure. And then the other thing that I heard in your story as well that resonates is it takes time. So what the doctors don't understand is so much of our chronic illness in America is mitochondrial damage. So that means you've got to introduce something that just wears your immune system down, wears your clogs your lymphatic system. I mean, it's amazing. Talk to providers about a lymphatic system. A bunch of them don't even know about that. And that's critical for mold people to move that lymph. But you're feeling so fatigued. It's just all you can do to get through the day. And you're just burning at both ends. And so the last thing I really wanted to ask you is, do you feel like the episode when you were eating with your friends, there was probably mold in that restaurant?
I never thought about that until you said it right now.
So
I also chalk it up to, because again, I don't know as much as or even as much as other people who have been in this for years. I chalked it up to, from what I read, is that like it causes permanent damage. And even though I'm out of the environment, that permanent damage is done. And this is the after effect of it. But I didn't think about the fact that mold could have been in that restaurant. I did not even think about that at all.
Mm-hmm. And the reason why I bring that up is one of my clients is in Tennessee. She's stuck there. Her daughter is so sick, went down for a wedding, got re-exposed, and is not allowed to come back to Alaska. She is not released by her medical team down there. They said she is so immunocompromised. And so that mom is in a restaurant down there filming, and she sends this to me, and it's just black on the walls. And she says, "Who do I call?" And I said, well, this is, phrases you'll hear in our world. We don't guess, we test. And although something looks like microbial growth, and usually it is, we also know there's walls that somebody had bet me $100,000 there's no microbial growth, and I could swab and send it to a lab and it'll come back hot as hot can be. So we don't guess, we test, and we listen to those who have a story, who have information. To discredit someone, why would any of us spend the time, energy, and oxygen to go around making something up that isn't true? I mean, I have better things to do with my life, but I have had that. I've had character assassination, and I'm a big.
The other thing back here is, there's mold everywhere. Yes, there's healthy amounts everywhere, but there's also toxic amounts. So
here's a new information for your repertoire, which is, yes, mold is everywhere. It was given for a purpose, but mold outside is not metabolically active. When you have mold from water damage in a building, this is how I like to describe it. Because if you give people a picture, it's like a coral reef. If you go to Hawaii and you go snorkeling, you can watch that coral reef come alive with the different fish, and they're eating the plankton and stuff. You see those different sea creatures moving around. Well, our air, we can't, but it's very much like that. So what happens in a water damaged building that's not properly remediated with our building materials currently that we use is like gang warfare. So Stachybotrys is going to start metabolically actively protecting itself against the other things in that environment. And we even know that EMF is causing some of these molds to become more sensitized and think more threatened. And so they're, what do you call it? Exasperating and not colonizing, but they grow a lot faster. They really do. I've seen a petri dish without Wi-Fi and then with, and it's just night and day. So there's a lot of factors, but again, changing times means we need to change our attitude. We need to change the way we do things because it's not helping anybody in 2026. There's too many of us. And I believe, I love you. You're brave. It's so commendable that you went and thought about your neighbors as yourself and you took those 6 packets because you might save somebody's life by doing that. And, the one thing you can also say too is you tried, at least you tried. Because what a lot of stories I hear too is people will just go quietly and just let it be because they don't want to rock the boat or they don't want to be character assassinated like I have been. And I say, that's coward. That's cowardly. Again, you said too, we live in America. Home of the free because of the coward? No.
Yeah.
Home of the free because of the brave. This is what I'm telling people. Be bold. That's what you are, Stefanie. I mean, you just said that. You took it upon yourself 3 years later to say, oh my gosh, this could harm these occupants. Although nobody else in Alaska, you've said, the agencies, nobody is willing to be honest and research this and look into it to protect the everyday citizen. We got to protect ourselves at this point with, knowledge and information and then bravery like what you did. I mean, so it's wonderful. I'm so sorry your son and you have had to go through this, but it sounds like you're coming out the other side. You are advocating for change. And we know in this world, when enough people are harmed and enough people tell their story, that's when change happens. And I think we're there. I think we were there a while ago, but it just seems like it's all kind of coming together right now. And that's what this platform is for. Because once our story is recorded and it's out there. Nobody can take it away from us. And so I can tell you're a beautiful soul. I just want to end this with, is there anything that you would like to share with our listeners about things that you wish you had done different or ways they can protect themselves?
Yes, looking back on it, I wish that I had, in my haste to get a better place for my son and I wish that I had inspected it more. The mold inspector did walk me through and showed me, and I was just horrified. I'm like, I didn't know, you know what I mean? So that's the only thing that I wish that I would have done different. And, maybe my son and I could have avoided all these medical issues. Yeah.
And you would think you're on, you get state help with your bills, which is great. But I think if you could look at someone in the eye, because this is a talking point in Juneau, our healthcare costs and Medicaid and Medicare and how much it costs. And oh my goodness, the federal government isn't giving us money. If you could have a clean home that wasn't poisonous, that didn't cause you to have medical coverage or state medical coverage, which would you choose?
It was a clean home. Yeah.
They need to hear that. They need to hear that. And that's another misnomer.
Because like I said, I went out of, for the years prior to that, I went out of my way to eat clean, take vitamins and supplements every day, to train hard. Like I will, the healthiest person. And I mean, I don't know that I'll ever get to compete again. I hope that I will. But I mean, we'll see. But yeah, it ruined one of the things that I loved. It ruined, well, for me physically. I mean, it ruined my health and my son's health. But yeah, like it's a lot.
Yeah. Mold is, and then the gaslighting. So it's very traumatic, like you say, very much PTSD. I have a master's degree that I can't use in this state anymore. And I went from like hero to zero overnight because I was like, oh my gosh, you're poisoning staff, you're poisoning students. And I had people cooperating behind me. It was and they went before me. So I had found out 9 years prior to me getting so sick, people were saying, oh my gosh, the buildings are making people sick. And it's really awful and should be criminal. I have a book coming out soon. I mean, not that this is for the plug on that, but this podcast is for others to get their story out because mine is coming out in a book very soon. And like I say, they can take away everything from me, but they can't take away my story. And it's getting published. It's getting published. And so, but we will just continue working together. And again, I want to thank you for being that brave soul that you are, encouraging you that when we work together, real change will happen. And I believe in my heart that the only way to leave this place, this state, to a healthier, more, well-being, youthful next generation is to address this, because the neurological damage this is doing to our youth, to our children is it's inexcusable is the word, I was trying to say. But so again, I'm going to sign off and say thanks, and we'll talk briefly because I want to give you a couple more resources, but unless there's anything else that you want to say, I just can't thank you enough.
Yeah, the last thing I want to say is I did forward the links to all of the previous mold stories to the representative, and she's like, oh yeah, I'm totally going to listen to these. So I did tell her that I was doing this and I want to send it to her as well. And I said, yeah, you need to let everyone there and, hear all these stories.
That's great. Thank you. Yeah, I have another one recorded as well, and many people waiting in the wings, men and females. We know it impacts the females more, but it impacts the guys as well, just in a different way. So I have a couple of men that are waiting in line. So thanks again, and we appreciate it. So this is Jennifer Kindred with Alaska Mold Stories and Stefanie tonight, my wonderful guests. We're going to sign off, and thanks for listening, and have a good evening.
This is Alaska Mold Stories, because sometimes healing begins when someone finally believes your story. With your hostess, Jennifer Kindred. Thanks for listening. Until next time, stay well.